Jerry Jones, if you are not familiar with him, you will be familiar with him tonight. So Jerry Jones, he is the owner of the Dallas Cowboys. And Jerry caught a lot of heat over the weekend because a picture of Jerry Jones from his teens has resurfaced. And Jerry Jones' response to it has not been well. Let's bring up that picture. Now, this is coming from Joshua Clark Davis. Wow. So Cowboys owner Jerry Jones was one of the bullies trying to stop his black classmates from desegregating Central High in Little Rock in 1957. So this is in reference to the Little Rock Nine. So they were the first group of African-American students to integrate a public school in the United States. Jerry Jones is the young man here circled in red. Now, for those of you who are wondering, yes, Jerry Jones has already confirmed that that is him. So let's go ahead and get that one out of the way. Let's get that out of the way. So you have to understand what is happening at this time. You have a group of African-American students just trying to go to school. If you're not familiar with the story about the Little Rock Nine, I highly recommend, there's documentaries about this that you can watch. I highly recommend that you watch them. There were members of the Little Rock Nine that were actually on Oprah's show a while back. They've been on different talk shows. And yes, a lot of them are still alive. And so when we talk about like the civil rights movement in this country, sometimes people talk about it as if this was a long time ago. Guess what? It wasn't that long ago. Jerry Jones is living proof of that. So the heat that is coming from this photo is the fact that here are some of the African-American students here, and they were being bullied at the time. They had rocks thrown at them. They were hit. They were pushed. And there you have Jerry Jones, who owns the Dallas Cowboys, who owns an organization with several African-American players, and who also, as I remember, when Colin Kaepernick decided to kneel, and by the way, it wasn't just Colin Kaepernick, there were other players that kneeled as well, but Colin Kaepernick was the one that was photographed highly at that time. Jerry Jones told his players that they could not. In fact, he didn't find it to be appropriate for them to kneel in reference to police brutality, for police officers killing unarmed Black people, but he had no problem taking a knee with them when there was criticism thrown at the NFL. Then it was okay for them to kneel. They just couldn't kneel over civil rights issues, over police brutality. By the way, that was pretty recent. So let's go on, because there's more to this story. Now you can see some of the comments here. Some of the comments are like crazy, crazy, crazy. But I do want to show you this clip first, because they talked about this on CNN this morning, and different people have had different takes on this. Some people are not happy with Stephen A. Smith, who he's one of the commentators on ESPN. I've watched Stephen A. for years. Those of us who watch sports, you know who he is. And he was kind of defending Jerry Jones. And some people are not too happy with Stephen A. right now. Unfortunately, I can't play that clip because it's ESPN and it's copyright. But I'll show you an image of it. And there's another thing I want to show you after this. But let's listen to how they talked about this issue with Jerry Jones on CNN.
This is a fascinating piece of reporting that we're going to talk about now. We're going to start with this photo. It's from September 9, 1957, and it shows Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones among a crowd of white students trying to keep Black students from integrating at an Arkansas high school. This is a Washington Post reporting. Reports that Jones, who was 14 at the time, could be seen standing a few yards from where the 6 black students were being jostled and repelled with snarling racial slurs by ringleaders of the mob. So joining us now, sports and feature columnist at the Washington Post, Sally Jenkins. Sally broke this story along with her co-author, David Moranis. We're so happy that you could join us this morning. Thank you very much. Happy Thanksgiving to you. And again, I have to commend you on your reporting. This whole thing is right. I mean, it's really stunning. It's fascinating. So
I'm not sure why it's stunning. I'm not sure why this is fascinating. These words are weird to me. I don't find it to be stunning. If you think about the time period, and if you think about what I just told you about Jerry Jones in the recent years about his behavior, I don't find this stunning. I don't find it shocking, and I don't find it fascinating. Actually, I find it pretty predictable. That's how I find it. That's how I look at it. Now, he did mention the fact that Jerry Jones was 14 years old, and this was the defense that Stephen A. had. Stephen A. said, well, he was only 14 years old. I mean, how can you go and dig up someone's past? And I'm going to get into that in a second, because there's some hypocrisy there as well with Stephen A. But yes, 14 years old. Okay. Jerry Jones' response to this was not good. I think he's trying to make some corrections now. But his response was like, yeah, that was me. He didn't apologize. Like, it's just, and I get it. The time period, I get that he was young. I understand that. I'm not saying I expected Jerry Jones to be like this hero and say, leave them alone. I don't expect that behavior to come from him. I just don't. What I do expect, though, is for him to say, hey, yes, that was me back then. That was wrong. What I did was wrong. This is messed up. Not just, yeah, that was me. I wasn't sure what was going on at the time. We're going to debunk that, by the way, because that's another thing that Jerry Jones said. He said he wasn't sure what was going on. He was just nosy at the time. We're going to debunk that. He knew exactly what was going on. Let's get back into the video.
So let's start with the picture, okay, and then we'll talk about, how he could have sort of moved diversity along with coaching in the NFL and in sports. Let's start with this photograph, though. What did you learn about this from this photograph?
Well, I think the first thing you learn is just how widespread the segregationists were in Little Rock and North Little Rock. Jerry Jones's high school was North Little Rock, which was across the Arkansas River from Central High School, which is the school that got all of the attention when Eisenhower sent in federal troops to protect the Little Rock Nine at that school over there. But the segregationist agitators were actually very active on both sites. And the fact that we knew that generationally, Jerry Jones had to have experienced the events in Little Rock more generally, but to find him in the photograph and to learn that he experienced one of those incidents right on the schoolhouse steps was pretty revelatory. We were blown away, to put it.
Why were you blown away? I don't think most Black people were blown away. Why are you blown away? You think it was just that one school that had this issue? You think nobody else in Arkansas, it was just that school? Nobody else there had an issue with the integration? Really? Because that's not what I learned about U.S. history. Based on the books that I've read, based on the documentaries that I've seen, remember what I told you guys, the civil rights movement was not popular. Wasn't popular. Why is she blown away? Do you know Jerry Jones? Are you and Jerry buds and bros? Why are you surprised? Why? Because he's an owner of a football team? Because he has Black players on the team? That's why you're surprised? Very interesting to me.
Mildly.
Let me ask you about this picture just quickly here, because he's saying, I was just there. I wasn't participating. I was there just sort of to observe.
He wasn't participating. He was just there to observe. Do you guys believe that? Okay.
But with the photograph, what you point out in your reporting is that in order to get where he was at the top of those stairs, that he had to get up there pretty quickly, and those were sort of the students that were keeping the black students from entering. Does this say anything about his participation? Are you making any sort of judgment about it, or?
No. Two things. First of all, he's a little at the time, so he's actually younger than the ringleaders that you can see in the photographs. That's one thing that we noticed. We did look at a sequence of photos leading up to those schoolhouse steps, and the white teenagers on the steps did have to move around the black students to get to the top of the steps.
Duh. Like, I don't understand why this is something that needed to be researched. For those of us who know the history, yes, they were the aggressor. Duh. Yes, they did approach the black students that were trying to get in. That they had to let Don Lemon had to let this woman do the research and the study to come on to talk about this. Don Lemon you don't know your history, Don? I find that hard to believe.
Nevertheless, he is further back. He is younger than the lead participants. And so I think that, you simply have to take him at his word unless something else appears, that he was there more out of curiosity and fascination, as opposed to being really at the very epicenter of the active events.
Why do we have to take Jerry Jones at his word? This is what she just said. She said, well, you really have to take him at his word. Why? Let me get this straight. We're going to make a comparison. So when it comes to Jerry Jones in this particular incident situation here, we got to take him at his word. We just got to believe what he says. But when it came to Kyrie Irving and this whole link that he shared from Amazon about the documentary, you guys know what I'm talking about. I got to be careful what I say on here as well. They couldn't take Kyrie at his word. He had to prove what he meant. You see the problem? Why couldn't you take, when Kyrie said what he said, why couldn't you take Kyrie at his word? But you can take Jerry Jones at his word. Anybody see a difference between the two? Okay.
He does remember, one thing he told us that did not make it in the story is that he does remember that it got physical. The tough guys that you see in the center of the photograph end up really pushing the kids down off the steps. And in fact, one of them is arrested.
I hope everyone takes a moment to read the reporting that you and David did as they watch football, because the reason you did this is not just about that photo. It's about what it means with his position of power in the league now and the NFL now and the position of power the Cowboys have, right? And this.
No one, if you were watching football on Sunday, if you're watching the game, nobody is sitting there reading a report while they're watching the game. And I watch football. I love football. I'm not reading a report while I'm watching a game. You guys just listen to the framing. Listen to the way that they speak to the American people. I hope people took the time to read this report while they were watching football. Have you been in a room with people watching football? You see them reading any reports? Now it goes on to say, Jerry Jones helped transform the NFL, except when it came to race. Again, this is not new. Especially those of you like me, if you've been watching football for a long time, we all knew this is not new information about Jerry Jones and the racial situations and the tensions that he's had at the Dallas Cowboys. That's not new.
This is part of what the Washington Post is doing, examining the NFL's, as you guys call, decades-long failure to equitably promote black coaches, right? And yes. Go ahead.
Well, this story is part of a long series we've been doing called Blackout, which is examining the issues in the league about the fact that almost 70% of the workforce is black, and yet there are only 3 head coaches. One of the things our data has found is that mid-level.
Stop it right there for a second. She's going on to say, listen to what she says here.
The fact that almost 70% of the workforce is Black, and yet there are only 3 head coaches. One of the things our
70% of the workforce is Black, only 3 head coaches are Black. Didn't Colin Kaepernick tell you that? But they didn't want to listen to him when he said it. She had to go dig up and do research. It's a part of this project, this study that we're doing. Didn't Colin Kaepernick, who played in the NFL, didn't he tell you that?
Data has found is that mid-level Black coaches who do manage to get head coaching jobs waited an average of 9 years longer in mid-level assistant coaching jobs than their white counterparts.
This is not new. In fact, damn, I wish Chuck Modi was on right now with me. Chuck Modi has reported about this years ago. Chuck Modi has been reporting about this. You guys don't follow Chuck Modi. He's on Twitter. Actually, I first knew about him because of sports. So like he was a sports journalist, but he's also a justice journalist. So he also is one of the journalists that documented the George Floyd protests. He goes to a lot of protest events in the DC area. But Chuck Modi's been talking about this for years. And this woman here, she come on to CNN acting like she just discovered something. Wow. The data that I just discovered. We found this data. Guess what we figured out? People knew this for years. For years, people have been complaining about this, man. You got to be kidding me.
So there's some very striking inequities within the league, as the league admits. And by the way, Jerry Jones was the only owner to talk to us for this series in any in-depth way.
Because you had dirt on him. Oh my God.
Give him a lot of credit for sitting down and having this very difficult conversation.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up, right? They all should have talked to you, by the way. But look, one of the sportscasters, well-known retired sportscaster in Dallas, Dale Hansen, said, what frustrates me most is he, meaning Jerry Jones, is in such a position, such a leader, that if he would take a strong stance, he could be the force of change in the NFL. And it seems like from your reporting, Jones agrees that he could be the change maker here for the league.
He did agree, and that was one of the more interesting things in our conversation with him, which lasted well over 2.5 hours.
So Jerry Jones does agree that he could be a change maker in the league. You've been a part of the league all these years. Why haven't you implemented any type of change? Jerry Jones knows his status. He knows the level that he's at. Why hasn't he tried to do anything to implement any type of change all these years?
Been at the forefront of this issue until now, and the short answer to that is that he's been more concerned with trying to win Super Bowls and appointing men who were old friends of his or who he knew to the job. In a college teammate of his second head coach was Barry Switzer, and again a guy he went way back to Arkansas with, and so. He's forthright in trying to address these tough questions. It doesn't mean you'll always be satisfied by his answers. But again, he was one of the only owner to really sit down and talk to us to this extent about it.
All right, so you have to give him some credit there. But I mean, listen, there were failures, and there are failures in the NFL, as this is pointing out. So
Sure.
Then what is, as you have been reporting this, again, Sally, it's great. Everyone should read this. It's fascinating.
Why does he keep saying that it's fascinating? What is fascinating about it? It's almost as if like Don Lemon and Miss, I don't know what her name is, and his co-host here, it's almost as if like they are really shocked and surprised by this. Why is it fascinating?
What's the solution here? What do you think should be done?
Well, I think one solution is the NFL has launched an inaugural accelerator program. It's not a solution. It's a tool. It's a mechanism to try to help owners get to know owners more personally. A lot of times what they lack are the close personal relationships. That's one thing we've heard. Owners don't spend much time with them. Owners talk to lots of head coaches. They talk to very few assistant coaches. If you're an owner of the New York Giants or the Dallas Cowboys, you're not probably spending a great deal of time talking to your running backs coach. So this accelerator program is one idea to try to get those relationships moving along. We'll see if it works. Quite frankly, a much better idea is for a team like the Dallas Cowboys, a real maker of manners, to hire a black head coach and to have a winning record or win a Super Bowl with one. When Tony Dungy was hired and won Super Bowls with the Indianapolis Colts, it definitely did trigger a moment there where the NFL looked like it was going to become much, much more diverse in its head coaching ranks. And then as our series...
She's not saying anything that Jerry Jones doesn't already know. What she's suggesting could be done, Jerry Jones already knows this. So yeah, it could be true. The owners don't interact with the players as much, but they could. Jerry Jones could walk down from his little box seat and interact with the players and get to know them. He could do that. So there's nothing here that she's saying that Jerry Jones doesn't already know. There's nothing here that's being said. She's like, well, he could hire a black head coach. Jerry Jones already knows this. Why are they trying to solve this problem for Jerry? I feel like, it's like, let's just get together and figure out how we can help them fix this situation. Isn't that interesting? What is that, Nico? CNN's commentary is usually redundant and boring. This is hilarious to me. Like,
it actually moved backward. It constricted again.
Yeah. Sally Jenkins joins us, and David Moranis is also the co-writer on it. It's from the Washington Post. Jerry Jones helped transform the NFL, except when it comes to race. Again, it is fascinating.
She basically wrote an article, with the exception of that picture, about Jerry Jones, saying he didn't help when it comes to racial issues. Again, those of us who watch football and know football, and I've been watching football since I was a kid, we already knew that. Now, to the point, did Jerry Jones just show up to observe? Was he just curious to see what was going on? Is it true that he didn't know what was happening? Let's see. Now, Michael Harriet, I don't know if you guys follow him on Twitter. He has a thread here. He pointed out some interesting things about this situation. Let's dive in. So I told you that Stephen A was saying that he's fond of Jerry Jones and he doesn't blame Jerry Jones. And I got to say something quick here. Okay. So he says Stephen A. Smith might be right. Maybe it's wrong to judge Jerry Jones for something that happened 65 years ago. Maybe he was just curious. How could anyone know? Now, this was the clip I was talking about here. I can't play it because ESPN, like I said, they're copyright. But I did see this clip and I heard what Stephen A. Smith said. And it's really interesting. He goes on to say, I'm very fond of Jerry Jones and he doesn't deserve what happened to him. You know what was interesting, though? Stephen A. Smith is willing to give Jerry Jones a pass and admit he's fond of Jerry Jones. But when it came to Kyrie, Stephen A. was like, nah, we need to throw him under the bus. Who's writing checks at ESPN? Somebody let me know. What was the difference? Why is it you weren't willing to have that same type of compassion and empathy for Kyrie, but when it comes to Jerry Jones, you're willing to give him a pass and give him the benefit of the doubt? Pay attention to things like this, you guys. Pay attention to it. Now, Michael goes on to say, the discussion centers around this photograph taken on September 9th, 1957, when white students tried to prevent 6 black students from integrating North Little Rock High School. One of those white students is Cowboys owner Jerry Jones. That's him right there. Now, he goes on to say, because this is a thread, it worked. They actually turned the black students away. The North Little Rock School District would not integrate until 1964. And Jerry Jones was right in the middle of it all. Now let's go on. To be fair, Jerry Jones was a sophomore in high school, And according to the Washington Post, he said, I don't know that I or anybody anticipated or had a background of knowing what was involved. It was more a curious thing. Let me get this straight. At that time, school integration was top news. This was national news, not just news in Little Rock, Arkansas. The National Guard had to come in to escort Black students into the school. And you mean to tell me that you didn't know what was going on? Nobody? I find that hard to believe. Let's go on. Michael goes on to say, so even though some people always find a way to contort themselves in a way that lands on the side of the powerful white establishment, maybe Smith is right about this one. Maybe Jones did not know what was going to happen. How could he have known? And this is a piece he included here. That directive did not deter Jones. He showed up near the conflict's epicenter, stationed at the top landing near the school's double leaf entry doors, a face in a rear row of the human bulwark, intent on keeping people out because of the color of their skin. Jones said he was only there to watch, not to participate. I don't know that I or anybody anticipated or had a background of knowing what was involved. It was more of a curious thing. So that's the quote coming from Jerry Jones. Like I said, again, you have to understand this was national news. The National Guard came in to escort the students into the school. This is not like this was just a local news thing. And you mean to tell me none of those students knew what was going on? I doubt that. I highly doubt that. Now let's go on. So Michael continues. If Jerry Jones, a high school football player, didn't know, it meant he wasn't listening when his coach warned the team that there would be trouble. Wait, didn't he tell the Post that he had heard? And then he has this clip here. Associated Press shows a young Jones wearing a striped shirt, craning for a better view, looking like a little burr head. It goes on to say, he was 1 month from turning 15. He had been bulking up by lifting weights and going through 2 days since August, trying to make the school's football B team. The coach, Jim Albright, had warned there might be trouble and said he didn't want to see any of you knotheads near the front of that school tomorrow. So the coach warned the students not to go there. But nobody knew what was going on, including Jerry. So Michael goes on to say, maybe he had no clue that people in his community were planning to use violence and the threat of violence to preserve white supremacy. Maybe he didn't communicate with a lot of his neighbors. Oh, wait. And then he has this piece here. Long before Jones became one of the most recognized National Football League team owners, he was recognized all over Rose City. His dad owned a grocery store, Pat's Supermarket on Broadway. Jerry spent most of his time working at the store. Of course, everybody would go in there and hope to see Jerry. All of us young girls, every once in a while. Havens chuckles. He was always friendly. And for the last 56 years, Georgia and her husband, also named Jerry, have lived just a few houses down from where Jones grew up. Now let's go on. So Michael goes on to say, it would also mean that Jones had no idea that his school was even planning to desegregate. After all, this happened on September 9th. What was the biggest story in Arkansas at that time? No, what was the biggest story in America? On September 2nd, 1957, Governor Orville Faubus announced that he would call in the Arkansas National Guard to prevent the African-American students' entry to Central High, claiming this action was for the students' own protection. In a televised address, Faubus insisted that violence and bloodshed might break out if Black students were allowed to enter the school. The Mothers League held a sunrise service at the school on September 3rd as a protest against integration. But that afternoon, federal judge Ronald Davies issued a ruling that desegregation would continue as planned the next day. But he had no idea what was going on. You guys know this is ridiculous, right? Let's go on. Because Michael let it all out. He goes on to say, but hindsight is 2020. What were people saying at the time? Who prevented those students from integrating into North Little Rock High School? According to every report I could find, the Black students were confronted by 10 white students in front of the school. But that's not what turned them around. And then he has this clip here. I know it's very small. This piece right here. Little Rock, the 6 Negroes made 2 attempts to enter. After they were shoved and pushed away from the building on their first try, the school superintendent, F.B. Wright, walked out of the building and gestured for the Negroes to follow him into the school. Call for troopers. Once again, they climbed the steps. Reinforcements flocked to the white students. Do you hear this? Once again, they climbed the steps, which means that the white students, they had to go up the steps to stop them from coming in. They were at the top of the steps. So basically, every time the Black students tried to get in, the white students came to the top of the steps, preventing them from getting in. 5 adults joined them. One adult identifying himself as L.E. Stroot and father of the girl student shouted, "They shall not pass." I mean, they went Gandalf up in this piece. You shall not pass. Michael goes on. The top of the stairs. This is the piece that's important, you guys. The top of the stairs. And he has this piece here. Oh, whoops. I think I clicked on the wrong thing. Let me go. Yep. The 6 students were approached by 10 white students at the front of the steps of the school. The white students pushed and shoved them away from the steps as 40 to 50 white adults watched from across the street. Principal George Miller, Superintendent F. Bruce Wright, came out of the school and asked the 6 students to come inside to talk. The North Little Rock 6 climbed the stairs again and reached the front door, but they were met by 20 to 30 white students blocking the entrance. The white students refused to move, even after Superintendent Wright threatened them with no admittance to the school for the year. The 6 Black students were instructed by Wright to meet him at the school administration building at 28th and Poplar Streets for their conference. So you guys see, like this just, and so Michael says, you know what? Maybe I'm making this up. Maybe we should ask someone who was there, like Richard Lindsay, one of the North Little Rock's 6. Let me see if I can get this going.
And they explained to me what was happening. We are going to try to enter North Rock High School. So they gave us a couple of rules. And one of them, we stay together, we walk together. You keep your head up. You don't act like you don't want to be here or like you're afraid. Keep your head up, walk straight ahead. As we walked, when we got in front of Chester's grocery store, the crowd intensified. In other words, there seemed to be more of them, and they were just swarming. And as I looked up the hill, like back down there was a grade, and you could look up, and you could see heads of people, and they seemed to be waving like heat. And there's so many of them, we could not figure out what they were doing. But we didn't speak, not even to each other. The ministers talked among themselves, but we didn't say anything, and we kept walking. And as we walked, the crowd got more intensified. They kept on telling us and calling the same thing over and over, over and over and over and over. You're not supposed to be here. Go home. Go back to your own school. This is not your school. Things of that nature. And it kept on and on and on. We stopped right here and we started to walk again right about here. And by this time, there was a crowd behind us, and there was a crowd coming from this street as if they were standing there waiting, and they were coming from that way.
So obviously this is a longer video there. And Michael said, apparently, not only did Jones not see the national, local, and state newspapers, we are supposed to believe that every student there knew what was going on except for Jerry Jones. Yet for some reason, Jones decided to go to the top of the stairs. So it just... Michael goes on to say, but here's my beef with this entire conversation and white supremacy in general. Forget about all those racist students and their parents and the cops and the school administrators or the government. What if Jerry Jones wasn't a violent segregationist? What if he really didn't want his classmates spitting on black kids and using the N-word? What if he wanted to attend an integrated school? No one expects teenage Jerry Jones to stand up to a mob by himself. But ask yourself this: why are the good white people never around? Why is it always black people versus all the white people? Why weren't there 25 or 10 or 6 white kids out there standing for what's right? Why weren't a dozen white parents out there? Why can't news reporters find them? Why aren't they on the police force or the school board? He goes on to say here, that is the point. The point is not that Jerry Jones was a violent segregationist. The point is that he can watch something like this and never mention it for the rest of his life. The point is not that Jones has never hired a black head coach, which is true, which he's not the only one. It's about how people can rationalize racism with fantastical excuses that have no basis in logic or reality. Jones not knowing what was going on that day is unbelievable as the CEO of a company with an 80% black workforce saying, I can't find a qualified shift leader. Michael went all in. And the crazy thing is, people will believe it. But maybe I'm one of those CRT people who distort history by applying today's standards to the past. Instead of listening to me or the guy who actually was there, let's see how newspapers back then described what happened. White students forced 6 from school ground. But this isn't about one day 65 years ago. It's about now. It's about why this inequality persists. But I truly understand why some people always seem to land on the side of defending whiteness. I even understand why some people will stand and watch and do nothing. We are all just trying to reach the top of the stairs. I don't believe that Jerry Jones didn't know what was going on. I think that's bullshit. But the point that I want to make is this. I understand that he was a teenager. He was a kid. Totally understand that. I understand the time period. I also understand that there were adults there doing that same behavior. I totally get all of that. The point that I'm trying to make is that there seems to be a different set of rules for some than for others. Why is it a career-ending announcement or demand to end someone's career when certain people make a mistake, whether it's from the present or the past? You're calling for their head. You want their career over. But then there are others who have mistakes from their past, and we got to make excuses. We got to say, well, they were young. Give them a chance. Give them a pass. But everybody doesn't get that same benefit of the doubt that Jerry Jones just got. That's the problem that I have. Why isn't everyone given that same benefit of the doubt? Because I got to tell you something. A 14-year-old Jerry Jones gets benefit of a doubt. 14-year-old black boys don't get the benefit of the doubt. You see what I'm saying? The 15-year-old black boy who was shot in the head, who was unarmed with his hands up, shot in the head by police, Jalen McMillan was not given the benefit of the doubt. That's the problem that I have. And that's my take on that. I'm going to go to some of the comments here. Rick says, I live in Texas and Jerry Jones being a racist ain't surprising at all. Bryce, Stephen A is always a biatch. I never liked the dude. He always flip-flops. He does. I've noticed that too. Angela, yeah, that was me, is what you say when you fart in an elevator, not for being a racist piece of shit. Notori, they can do shit like this because they can't talk about a damn Epstein videos and who was on those planes. That's right, Jay. The difference is if he never owned up to it and apologized for it and made an attempt to repair the damage he did. And his behavior that we've seen throughout the years. Rick says, literally, really good black coaches like Eric Benamy has been passed up for years now. Kathy Joe, Sabby, could you please clip this bit about Jerry Jones? I have to share it with my kids. We could do that. We could do that. Lee, white folks used to show up and watch black folks get hung. Was that curiosity? That's a good point, Lee. That's a good point. All right. And if there's any comments on Rockfin, I'll take those as well. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Copy and pasted 2019 New York Times article with Keith Miato. Racial segregation in public ed has been illegal for 65 years in the United States. Yet American public schools remain largely separate and unequal, with profound consequences for students, especially students of color. Today's teachers and students should know that the SCOTUS declared racial segregation in schools to be unconstitutional in the landmark 1954 ruling of Brown v. Board of Education. Perhaps less well known is the extent to which American schools are still segregated. That's right. According to a recent Times article, more than half of the nation's school children are in racially concentrated districts where over 75% of students are either white or non-white. In addition, school districts are often segregated by income. The nexus of racial and economic segregation has intensified educational gaps between rich and poor students and between white students and students of color. Although many students learn about the historical struggles to desegregate schools in the civil rights era, segregation as a current reality is largely absent from the curriculum. End of article. Now take a look at the part that focused on segregated by income. Remember, we never wanted to integrate. We were good with staying in our own community. We just wanted equal funding for our schools. Yet we are still segregated with underfunded schools. If we are being forced to stay in our communities, then let's charter local public banks in our communities to fund our public school districts. That is until the feds and the state government decide to get off their ass and take over funding of all school districts. Well said there.